The glitz, the talent, the stage, and the standing ovations. Broadway's biggest night is here. From breakthrough debuts to record-breaking nominees, the 2025 Tony Awards are full of showstoppers. And we've got all the access to the nominees and biggest shows. From exclusive behind-the-scenes set visits to Maybe Happy Ending and Buena Vista Social Club, how designers brought Stranger Things to life, to interviews with everyone from Darren Criss, Audra McDonald, Jonathan Groff, Sadie Sink, and so much more. Who's making history, what moments will steal the spotlight, and what surprises are waiting in the wings. Plus, a look at how Cynthia Erivo is having a full-circle moment as this year's Tony's host. The music, the fashion, and the forces behind and in front of the curtain. This is the Hollywood Reporter's Awards Countdown Tony's Edition.
What's going on, everyone? I'm Neha Joy, and welcome to the Hollywood Reporter's Tony Awards pre-show. I'm coming to you from the heart of New York City, right here on the iconic Top of the Rock, which is just steps away from Broadway's legendary theater district. Now, from the shows and musicals making waves to the actors making history, this year's telecast is set to be packed with some unforgettable moments. And today we're taking an inside look at some of those must-see shows, standout performances, and even a few behind-the-scenes surprises. But first, let's kick things off with a look at some of those numbers behind this year's Tony nominations.
The final countdown to this year's Tony Awards is on. Let's take a closer look at the Tonys by the numbers. The 2025 Tony Awards will be held at Radio City Music Hall, which holds an audience of 5,960. There are approximately 831 people from various theatrical organizations who currently vote for the Tony Awards. The group of eligible voters includes voting members of the Broadway League and the Board of Directors, as well as designated members of the Advisory Committee of the American Theater Wing. This year marks the 78th annual Tony Awards. The ceremony hands out trophies in 26 competitive categories, excluding special honors and awards. Director and producer Harold Prince holds the record for the most Tony wins by any individual. He received 21 Tonys during his career. Hamilton holds the record for the musical production with the most Tony nominations with 16 noms. And last year, Stereophonic became the play production with the most Tony nominations when it received 13 noms. Audra McDonald made history this year when she received her 11th Tony nomination for her star role as Rose in Gypsy on Broadway, making her the most Tony-nominated performer of all time. McDonald is also the most awarded performer in Tony history with 6 wins. Angela Lansbury has emceed the show more times than anyone else. She's hosted the Tonys 5 times. Right behind her are Neil Patrick Harris and Hugh Jackman, who have both emceed the ceremony 4 times. Some say Bob Fosse has the triple crown, as he's the only director to win a Tony, an Oscar, and an Emmy in the same year. He accomplished this feat in 1973. Only 2 productions have won all of the Big 6 awards for musicals, South Pacific in 1950 and The Producers in 2001. And it all comes down to one night, when the Tony Awards air live on Sunday, June 8th on CBS at 8 p.m. Eastern.
We're here at the gallery at Rainbow Room to chat all about this Broadway season, which delivered some standout performances, from original new works to some powerful revivals that moved audiences in every way. Here to break down our top Tony contenders are THR's longtime theater critic, David Rooney, who's now our chief film critic, business writer Caitlin Houston, who covers all things Broadway, and our executive awards editor, Scott Feinberg. Thanks so much for joining us, guys.
Yeah, thanks for doing this.
Yeah. So before we jump into the ballot, I just wanted to ask a few overarching questions. The first one being, what do we think of this year's group of nominees, and what do we find refreshing about this crop?
I like that there's a mix of veterans who have done a million Broadway shows and newcomers. So there is this sense of new blood coming in. I mean, the entire company of John Proctor as the villain, for example, it's a great company, and they're all pretty new to Broadway.
Sunset Boulevard too.
Sunset Boulevard as well, yeah. I think that both Nicole Scherzinger and Tom Francis are really great discoveries in that. Yeah, I mean, it's a nice mix.
I feel like we have a lot of original musicals this time around, which is exciting, or at least original enough. We've got Operation Mincemeat, which is based on history and technically a movie. And we've got Death Becomes Her, which is based on the film, but it's doing something so different from the film. Mm-hmm. And then we have some fully original musicals, like Maybe Happy Ending, Dead Outlaw, very original, also based on history, I guess.
Yeah.
But that was exciting to see, especially coming from the pandemic.
No, it's nice because often the musicals just feel like regurgitated movies. And I think that what's great about Death Becomes Her, as you say, is that they do reinvent it quite a bit.
I mean, I just have been struck by how many electric performances there are this year across the categories. It's so thrilling to see Nicole Scherzinger in Sunset Boulevard or Audra in Gypsy. Then you've got, unlike anything else that I can think of, Cole Viscola in O Marion. I found that sometimes, maybe more often than usual even, the performances have kind of outshined the shows themselves in some cases, but there's a lot of really exciting acting going on this season, I think.
Definitely. And
Yep.
Caitlin, how have some of these shows done in the box office? And do you think Broadway has truly bounced back from the pandemic?
Yeah, it actually has bounced back. They officially said a few weeks ago that the Broadway grosses were surpassing that same point in the 2018-2019 season, which is the benchmark that they're measuring everything against, because that was before the pandemic. It was a record season. So the box office is doing very well, especially for these celebrity-driven shows. Good Night and Good Luck with George Clooney is breaking records every week, making more than $4 million. Othello with Denzel and Jake Gyllenhaal also posting huge numbers. Everyone else is kind of like in between, but overall it's contributing to a surge in the box office.
Yeah. Well, speaking of George and Denzel, there's a lot of Hollywood faces this season. So how have Tony voters regarded Hollywood talent this season?
I think it's just traditionally with some distance. I think, some people were shocked when Julia Roberts came and did 3 Days of Rain with Paul Rudd and Bradley Cooper, maybe, years ago, and none of them got a mention. And I think people thought in particular it was a slap to Julia Roberts. But, the fact is, sometimes movie actors are used to looking for their light in the camera. They're not really that able to project a stage presence. And, the Tony voters are serious people. They're serious about theater. The Patti LuPone cap who was like, not in my town, get out, Uma Thurman. It's tough. And I think some of the film actors this year have not done so well. Like George Clooney's performance, as much as the play is admirable, what it's about, what it's saying, I think the performance is quite underpowered, subdued to a fault. And Denzel Washington is just, I'm sorry, not good in Othello. And
Really?
yeah.
We're not good enough for $900 seats.
Yeah.
There are some big names that from Hollywood, like Clooney and Darren Criss, and people who have been nominated, but there were a lot of people surprised, less so about Denzel and Gyllenhaal not getting in, but Kieran Culkin.
I think it's also interesting because you have your Broadway stars and your Hollywood stars, where a lot of the theater community is like, Audra and Gypsy is my ultimate show. She is their Hollywood star, and that's who they're waiting for. Or even like Jennifer Smart and Megan Hilty. Those are the true stars for the theater community, because we know that they can perform. This is their medium. Everyone else, you're kind of just like, let's see how they do.
Okay, so we're going to start with Best Actress in a Play. The Best Actress in a Play nominees are Laura Donnelly, The Hills of California; Mia Farrow, The Roommate; LaTanya Richardson-Jackson, Purpose; Sadie Sink, John Proctor is the Villain; and Sarah Snook, The Picture of Dorian Gray. Okay, so a lot of great contenders in this mix. What do we think of this crop of nominees?
I think it's Sarah Snook's maybe hands down. It's really hard to compete with her in Dorian Gray, because she's playing every single character, acting opposite herself via live feeds and pre-recorded video. I think it's 2 hours just uninterrupted of her, almost interrupted of her on stage running around.
26 different characters.
26, yeah. And it's just like a marathon of acting that you're watching. So these other nominees are all really great as well. It's just almost like she should be in a different category, I'd say.
I agree. And the only thing that gives me a little pause, and she won the Olivier, there's a lot of reason to believe this is hers hands down. The one thing that's a little disconcerting is most of the other nominees are from shows that are nominated for Best Play. It's not like it always has to for the person to win in the acting category, but that is the only argument that is even on
So David and Caitlin, who are your picks for who should win?
I'm going to go. I just think that what she's doing in John Proctor is really good, and she manages to be part of the ensemble, but at the same time stand out. And the energy at that show is phenomenal. You go to that show, the night I went on a press night, there was a large school group, primarily girls, and they were squealing. And then out in the lobby at the end of the show, they were still squealing and all huddled together down by the restrooms, talking a mile a minute. And oh my God, oh my God, that was so funny. And the Lord song that they use in the end, Green Light, I think that went over really well with them. And so it was great to see kids of that age, high school kids, really connecting with theater.
So maybe that's an argument for best play for John Proctor.
I mean, I wouldn't be upset.
I'd like to know who went to Stranger Things, The First Shadow, thinking they were going to see Sadie Sink, and didn't work out.
And they're right across the street from me.
Yeah, that's really funny. Absolutely.
And Caitlin, who's your pick?
Well, again, I think it's Sarah Snook's category. An upset would be exciting, although Sarah Snook is working so hard on stage.
I love an upset.
And Scott, as our awards expert, who will win? Is this Sarah Snook's to take?
It would, I think, if you ask any of the odds makers it would be a huge shock if it wasn't Sarah Snook. So I think that's the expectation.
I mean, I had always thought about returning to theater just because this is where I started, and I thought it would be like, just such a fulfilling experience and educational experience to return as an adult. And also I think the challenge is there, which is that like being on stage, it's like, I don't know, it was like a new muscle for me, or like an old muscle that was out of practice. So tapping back into that, and yeah, I've just learned so much, and like there's been so many highs and lows of like feeling like I don't know what I'm doing, and like the preview process and everything, but I couldn't ask for a better team to be surrounded by. Our cast is incredible. Danya and Kimberly are so supportive.
Okay, we're going to move on to Best Actor in a Play. The Best Actor in a Play nominees are George Clooney, Good Night and Good Luck, Cole Escola, Oh Mary, John Michael Hill, Purpose, Daniel Day Kim, Yellowface, Harry Lennox, Purpose, Louis McCartney, Stranger Things, The First Shadow. Okay.
Well, we can count him out. I just don't think there's much excitement around that show or that performance. You know, the super fans of Stranger Things on Netflix are going. I don't know that anyone in the theater community, the Tony voters, are particularly excited about it. And also it just feels like another kind of theme park element of Broadway that a lot of people just have a knee-jerk reaction against. My pick would be unequivocally Cole Escola. I worship at the altar of Cole Escola. They are a genius and a comedy genius. I had loved their work on a bunch of TV shows, especially the late lamented At Home with Amy Sedaris, which was just the craziest, most bonkers show ever aired. And Cole Escola was wonderful in it.
I think it's not a close call as far as like David's saying. Cole Escola, it's so different than anything else that it's also a show that came up from off Broadway and has been
open. Everybody thought this is insane bringing this to Broadway, and it's doing $1 million+ a week.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about John Proctor as the villain because the playwright said the reason that she wrote that play is because Woody Allen called the Harvey Weinstein allegations and the Me Too movement a witch hunt. So that made her start thinking about the crucible and what it means to have a group of witches. And now we've got Weinstein on trial again, and this play even more relevant.
Yeah.
Yes.
So David and Caitlin, who do you think should win in this category?
Oh, Cole Escola.
I think Cole would be the first non-binary performer in this category.
Yeah.
There have been non-binary performers who have won in other categories, but that would be the standout for this one.
The miscast gala where
The
Cole
miscast,
did
yes.
the entirety of a chorus number from The Music Man, playing all the parts.
As ensemble, as a burlesque number.
Yeah, it was fantastic. But yeah, I think that, that play also came along at a time when it was during the election campaign. We were all feeling really worn down by the constant barrage of political news, most of it bad, most of it depressing. Whatever side you're on, I think that play kind of opened up this 90-minute world where you just howl with laughter nonstop. I mean, I don't remember a play that delivered such a high ratio of laughs per minute. And Conrad, Ricamora, the others in the cast are very good, but Cole is the one who binds everyone together. And I think there's such a skill in that. And also, it's like a throwback to Charles Ludlam and the Ridiculous Theater Company. It's a kind of lunatic theater production that we don't get very much, and we certainly don't get it on Broadway. So I thought it was just a bold move to bring it here. I'm so thrilled that it's done so well.
Yeah. And Scott, who will win? Is this a landslide victory for Cole?
I think so. And to the extent that other nominees who shall remain nameless have withdrawn from certain campaigning things they were intending to do because it's just looks silly at this point. So I think that it's acknowledged around even the pool of nominees that this one's over.
Okay, well, we'll see who brings home this award. Now, guys, sit tight. We're going to be back in just a bit with our best actress and actor in a musical.
You know, I treat it entirely like a job. When I'm outside of work, you know, I'll have thoughts, but I mainly try to just stay like Louis, like really Louis outside of work, because the show is intense, and you know, I'll get into work, I'll warm up properly, and I'll start to play some music and kind of get into it a little, and you know, that's when it's like go time, you know, and it's time to show up and it's time to do your job, because you know, I think, you know, you can talk about acting and, you know, and it's great to get really deep and all into it. But at the end of the day, is people are paying, and, you know, I got to be on stage and I got to be top form. And that means there's a mechanism to it which helps in kind of the dissection, because then it's simpler, you know, and there's no veil or crossing or muddling of, you know, who I am. And I mean, my sleep is a little worse. My nightmares are a little worse. I'm a sleep talker and a sleepwalker.
As if we couldn't be any higher in the sky, I'm here at Top of the Rock's newest attraction, Skylift. This is an open-air platform that rises 30 feet above the rooftop and spans 360 degrees for panoramic views of the city. Talk about surreal. Now, speaking of surreal, let's talk about one of the buzziest shows on Broadway right now, Stranger Things' First Shadow. That's right, Netflix has made its way to Broadway, complete with mind-bending effects, jaw-dropping design, and the perfect amount of spooky. But how did the Upside Down make its way to the stage? Well, we interviewed the team behind the magic to find out. Take a look.
It's not real. You are the shadow!
We are the design team behind Stranger Things, The First Shadow on Broadway.
Even though we knew it was Stranger Things and that the you know, the stakes were really high and it was really ambitious, we weren't quite aware until we were in the room with Stephen, that first meeting, how ambitious it was going to be. And there were lots of things that we, you know, that weren't necessarily a part of the script yet that we were discussing with Stephen. There were lots of things that were already in the script, and you know, the task of making a full-size battleship appear at the beginning of the show was partially terrifying and partially exhilarating. I mean, I don't know about you, Chris, but I left the room with a skip in my step thinking about
Buzzing, absolutely buzzing.
what you achieve.
You know, all credit to Kate, our amazing playwright, who sort of gave us this beautiful story, you know, with all these very highly theatrical moments. So she hadn't written for the stage before, so it gave us these incredible challenges and also possibilities.
We definitely had to deliver effects that felt like they were in the Stranger Things universe. The projection design, we're sort of in video design, we are sometimes creating a backdrop behind the scene, but we're always, in general, we're adding a layer of light to the scene. So it's working closely with John, our lighting designer, and Jamie and Chris and Miriam, and also Paul, our sound designer, working to create the tapestry of visual effects and what you see and hear in the theater.
There were two challenges for Chris and I, that there were the known elements of the world, the known elements of the canon, and you know, from a very early stage, we knew from Kate's script that we were going to have to deliver some of the things that were already a part of the world of Stranger Things. And so there was a lot of head scratching and group discussion between the entire creative team about how are we going to do those moments. But then at the same time, we were also really aware that, you know, this was a new offering into the Stranger Things universe, and we wanted to do things that were unique to the stage version of what we were doing and things that the audience hadn't seen before.
A lot of what we do is not just designing the visual, it's designing time. It's designing how long things take. How much time do we need to make a ship appear or disappear? And then really pushing ourselves to do that in the least amount of time possible. There's a whole moment in that sequence where you see an empty a sky, a starry sky, and an empty sea. It's a piece of scenery that the audience sees for 3 seconds, and then it's gone and never seen again. But without that moment, without that little bit of time in that sequence, it doesn't work.
So for me, one illusion that audience can't believe is happening live is the ship, because I think it has to do with scale, that something so big appearing quite literally out of nowhere and then disappearing again in such a short amount of time is it doesn't happen very often.
That's what I personally found exhilarating about working with Kate. Is she's like, hey, I've written this opening scene and we've got to make a ship vanish and then reappear in another dimension. And you're like, oof.
One illusion is the gantry fall. It's when Patty's falling down the gantry in Act 2. And, we purposely, put it into this kind of slow motion effect. And I think just due to the nature of that, due to the way that we've sort of framed it and what Patty does sort of with her body as well, it feels like it shouldn't be possible what you're seeing. And even with us sort of, knowing, obviously having designed how it works, we look at it every night and it's still got this kind of impossibility to it almost, which is really exciting.
When Henry steps out of himself or he's lying on a bed and the lights flicker and he steps out and he's still on the bed, and I think that it was more challenging than it might appear, but it gets lovely reactions from the audience.
A lot of my sort of colleagues in the theater who go to see the show can't figure out how we did is the rat in at the beginning of Act 2. There's a rat in a cage and he's just running along in the cage, and then all of a sudden Henry takes over and that's a horrible thing to the rat. And it is a completely believable effect even up close.
One of the big differences, I think, from London to when we went to Broadway is we revisited blood, and blood's such a big thing in the show. And we wanted the blood to be bigger and we wanted the blood to be more visual and for the audience to see it more. So we definitely upped our ante on the blood.
And we have a great big mind flare now descending above the audience, let's not forget, which is quite different than to what it is in London.
For some of the jump scares we do, particularly at the end of the show, I like to just sort of look to one side and watch the audience jump in their out of their skin at that moment. That's pretty satisfying.
I had an amazing discussion during previews with an audience member, and he said, "What do you do?" I said, "Oh, I did the special effects with Chris over here," and he was so blown away and so amazed by the show that we'd all made together. He was holding back tears telling us about it, and I had one of those moments where you realize that for the fans this is a really special experience, and I think I knew that, of course I knew that, but it was really driven home.
It's not real.
Hey guys, we're here at the Schoenfeld Theater where we're bringing the rhythm of Havana to Broadway. The 10-time Tony-nominated Buena Vista Social Club is bringing the soul of Cuban music to new audiences and displaying the richness of Cuban culture through music, movement, heart, and resilience. Today, we're going behind the scenes with choreographers Justin Peck and Patricia Delgado, and they're telling us how they're bringing the Cuban music to life on stage. And if we're lucky, they may even show us a few new moves. So let's check it out.
The Buena Vista Social Club is a show that's essentially about the making of this Cuban album that was made in the 90s, and it follows several characters who were musicians, part of the making of that album, and it jumps back and forth between the 90s and the 50s and kind of imagines what their trajectory was like and what their experience was like as young people who had their first experience with a place called the Buena Vista Social Club.
I think what our show does is it dives into these actual living artists and the trajectory of meeting when they were young and the hardships that their community, their culture, their country went through, and how they don't have the opportunity to really fully feel the height of their artistic experience until much later in life.
This is the kind of show that really meets an audience halfway, and you feel that from the first song when the band and the cast enters onto the stage. It's just like this swell of energy, and there's a kind of like essence to it that it's hard to articulate exactly what it is, but everyone feels it night after night.
I think the whole creative team had the vision to celebrate and honor the music. That was always like our guiding light. And I think when we cast this band, they're not just incredible musicians, but their mission is to spread Cuban music.
There's a very diverse range of kinds of movements, everything from mambo and salsa to Afro-Cuban dance to even things like ballet and modern dance are a big part of the Cuban culture.
Such a collaborative experience with like the book writer and the director and the music department and the cast and the production, and there's just this support, and when you get the right support to hold up the dance and people who understand the power of dance, it's a testament to what it can do for a show.
Especially Patricia's family was so thrilled to come and experience the show because, maybe you should talk about that.
They've never been back to Cuba since they came when they were kids. And even just like researching and talking about the show at home, around our dining room table, it was unpacking so many memories and stories and difficult challenges emotionally. And I'll never forget my mom on opening night was like, I've never been back to Cuba, but you brought Cuba to me.
Patricia and I are married and we've worked together in different capacities, but this is the first time where we're actually co-choreographers on a Broadway show together. The music has been so much a part of both of our lives, dating all the way back to when we were kids, basically. We've just
so
been...
much so that it was the first dance at our wedding. We both share an incredible passion for this music, and again, like when we look back on that moment, we're like, we never thought we'd actually bring this to a Broadway stage, so why not do it? We choreographed it for my sister and her husband and my mom and dad and Justin and I. That was our first dance. So the choreography of this show started a while ago.
Okay guys, we are here with Justin Peck and the fabulous dancers of Buena Vista Social Club. And they are gonna teach me a few moves. So let's do it.
A typical rehearsal day for us now that the show is open, most of the time we just get here and start getting ready to do our show, and everybody have a different routine. Like we all have a ballet bar back there, different warm-ups, we roll up, we stretch, we do abs, whatever we need to get the show ready. And obviously in the process of the show, since we are doing it 8 times a week, there are things that get lost, and if we need it, then we get here a little bit earlier and we sit down, we give some notes, and then we review and try to put back the essence of the show back again into our body so we don't lose the integrity of the movement.
So we have like many kinds of rehearsals. We have understudy rehearsals. We are now currently going through like Tony rehearsals, or we might have like B-roll rehearsal for any special appearance that we might be doing. And so we have shows 8 times a week, and then we would be called here, like today we were called at 11 a.m.
11 a.m.
Exactly. And so you get...
Yeah, but some of us, for example, like I know you have rehearsals on Thursdays and Fridays for understudy rehearsal, which is completely different because she covers both the lead girls in the show.
Patricia and Justin. Justin Peck, Patricia Delgado, they're out there. I always admire their work. And I feel so lucky, grateful to be here and seeing their process, being in the studio with them, it's incredible. They come to the studio knowing what they want to do, and everything just flows. And yeah, they're incredible. They're genius to me.
Oh my God, I love them together. They're like yin and yang. They need each other in the best way. They're like perfect dynamics.
I think for me, the most special part of this is that I get to be myself and bring my culture, my Panama with me, and it doesn't feel out of place. It feels so welcomed. It's encouraged.
Yeah, I think the most important part for me is that we are so authentic. Like, we are not trying to play anybody else in this show. We are playing ourselves. It's our story, it's our music, it's our culture, it's our dance, it's our movement, and I think that brings a certain type of joy that you cannot replicate when you're trying to be somebody else. It's something that is innate, and I think that's the most beautiful part of being here.
It's a total party. I don't know. On stage, it's like the place you want to be.
A great costume can make a performance come alive on stage, and a great red carpet look can make it a knockout awards night. And for Broadway stars, they definitely know how to deliver a fashion moment. So let's take a look at some of the best red carpet looks over the years at the Tony Awards.
Broadway's biggest night isn't just about the awards, it's also where theater meets high fashion. From classic glamour to bold statements, the Tony Awards red carpet has served iconic looks that even rival Hollywood's hottest runways. In the 80s and 90s, the Tonys leaned into elegance. Legends like Bernadette Peters, Liza Minnelli, and Sigourney Weaver dazzled in sequins and old-school silhouettes. Think opera gloves, big hair, and timeless grace. At the 39th Tony Awards in 1985, Weaver wore a black sequin column gown with opera gloves. And in 1996, at the 50th Annual Tony Awards, Peters is seen sporting black satin slacks with a sequin halter top, standing next to Minnelli in a matching sequin V-neck top with a jacket and adding some flair with a neck scarf to accessorize the look. Moving on to the early 2000s, when Wicked was casting its spell on Broadway and the red carpet. Kristen Chenoweth brought old Hollywood charm in a strapless red gown, while Idina Menzel paid homage to Elphaba with a stunning emerald around her neck, wearing a periwinkle gown in 2004. We also saw stars like Gwyneth Paltrow in 2001, who wore a short-sleeved dress with a plunging neckline and a sheer floral skirt. And then in 2006, Sutton Foster donning an ivory mermaid gown with delicate feathers. Moving on to later years, we see stars like Jennifer Lopez in 2015 wearing a midnight blue Valentino gown with gold embroidery, and Lucy Liu in 2016 for the 70th Tony Awards in a pastel yellow halter gown. Then came the fashion revolution, where Billy Porter redefined red carpet rules with this fierce red and pink look by Celestino Couture in 2019, being the moment. Following in 2023, Lupita Nyong'o took a more structured approach, pairing a black tuxedo pant with a metallic breastplate. And in 2024, we have Cynthia Erivo wowing the carpet with a custom gold sequin Louis Vuitton gown, followed by Ariana DeBose in a dazzling mosaic Oscar de la Renta. Every year, the Tonys red carpet gets bolder, brighter, and more unforgettable. So as the curtain rises once again, who will steal the spotlight this time?
We were seeing Rose's life through a black lens, and we're not we haven't changed anything in the show at all. We're just embodying who we are. I'm not trying to be anybody else's Rose. I'm not trying to be Ethel Merman. I'm not trying to be Angela Lansbury or Patti LuPone or Bernadette Peters. I'm being Audra McDonald's Rose, and so. And all that means without changing a single line. So when we have lines like "I was born too soon and got started too late," hits differently when you hear that coming from a black woman in the 20s.
We're back and we are moving on to the musicals. We're going to start with our actresses. The contenders for Best Actress in a Musical are Megan Hilty, Death Becomes Her, Audra McDonald, Gypsy, Jasmine Amy Rogers, Boop the Musical, Nicole Scherzinger, Sunset Boulevard, and Jennifer Simard, Death Becomes Her. So a lot of people have been talking about Audra McDonald's performance in Gypsy. How does this stack up in terms of other iterations of this production?
I love this production. I think that she's not a perfect vocal fit for the role, but she sells anything. And she's just a consummate actor. You know, she is the consummate musical theater actor. So I love what George C. Wolfe, the director, does to it without changing a word of the script, but just putting a woman of color in that role at that time in history. You get a sense so much more of her struggle, of why she's so hungry, why she wants this. Because she's an incredibly abrasive character. She's basically the monster sage mother of all time. But she makes you feel for her. And I think that in terms of all-round 360-degree performance, I just don't think anything comes close. I love Nicole Scherzinger in Sunset. You know, she can do the haughty diva thing, the Gloria Swanson take on the character, but she is primarily great because of her vocals. I mean, she kills 2 or 3 of those songs. You know, probably the only memorable songs in the show.
Mid-show standing ovation.
Yeah, and you know, she's just got incredible magnetism, but I don't think she has the subtlety, the nuances in her acting that Audra has. Audra only has 6 Tonys. She needs more.
I was going to say, I think that it'll be interesting to see how the voters consider that, if they consider that, because this is somebody who's certainly been thoroughly recognized with Audra. All 4 acting categories she could have won in are among the 6 total, which is a record. She's now the record, solely in possession of the record for most nominations.
11, right?
11. I think for some people, it may be tie goes to the person who's also great and has never been recognized, which would be the Nicole Scherzinger, presumably. And that show is a phenomenon. But obviously, there are many, many people like David and all of us, I think, just hold Audra in such a high regard. But I don't think she's lacking for recognition. In fact, this very day, she is on the cover of Time magazine as I think it says the greatest Broadway actress of her generation or something, which it's hard to argue, but it's tough. It's sort of like this comes up in film coverage sometimes, where it's like if a Spielberg film was released under a new Spielberg film was released under somebody else's name, people might be more excited about it than when it's Spielberg's name, because you're judged against all of your previous incredible work. And I think in this case, Audra has set such a high bar with past work that even though she's terrific in this, is she as terrific as, you know, any number of others? And so there are all these different kinds of considerations.
We've talked a little bit about Nicole Scherzinger already, but her Broadway debut has been a topic of conversation. What do we make of her kind of taking this turn over to Broadway?
She's done the West End before, so I think they're more accustomed to her in London, and we almost got her for Cats on Broadway as Grisabella. But I think that the Broadway audiences were, at least people I talked to, were a little surprised at how great she was in this production, because everyone knew that she can sing, but they weren't sure about seeing her on stage. And I think it was a pleasant surprise.
Also, there's a big difference between singing Pussycat Dolls pop and singing Andrew Lloyd Webber's faux Puccini.
Well, and she does prove to be pretty adept at, you know, Sunset Boulevard, the subject matter is very dark, but it is under, you know, there's a lot of comedic stuff there, and she does I think a good job with that.
And she's also willing to poke fun at herself in this show, which is fun to see.
And it's kind of poetic that they are literally right across the street from each other. Audra and Scherzinger, one of them is I can't imagine that the winner will not be one of those two. There's great, both the Death Becomes Her actresses are great, but it's hard to beat a co-star. They just don't have the profile of this.
David and Caitlin, who should win?
For me, Audra. You know, I'm not going to be mad if Nicole Scherzinger wins. She is working very hard and she's doing something fantastic. But Audra is just a whole other level. And it's, you know, the objective awards shouldn't be, oh, she's won enough, we need to give it to someone else. It should be, what is the best work this season? And I think she is doing the best work this season.
That's a question that I haven't answered yet. I've been talking to people in the industry and friends, and everyone is really torn on Audra versus Nicole. So
what was your personal?
I couldn't say.
You could have said, all right.
We'll leave it as a question mark.
The interesting thing is both Audra and Nicole have been campaigning hard, whereas normally, you know, people of this caliber in this point of their career, you might not see them go so hard.
Yeah.
So Scott, with all this being said, who's taking this one?
I'm gonna upset somebody here. I do think it's gonna be Scherzinger, but I would not be shocked or disappointed if it was Audra.
Glenn Close, when she came to see our show the other day, she told me, and she said, this is arguably one of the greatest roles ever written for a woman. And I agree with her. You know, it really tests your mettle, as she says. And it's not for the faint of heart. And I have grown exponentially. This role has really surprised me because I'm finally have become and am still becoming who I am and who I was meant to be. And this is what I was born for.
Okay, moving on to the actors. Best Actor in a Musical, Darren Criss, Maybe Happy Ending, Andrew Durand, Dead Outlaw, Tom Francis, Sunset Boulevard, Jonathan Groff, Just in Time, James Monroe, Iglehart, A Wonderful World, the Louis Armstrong Musical, and Jeremy Jordan, Floyd Collins. Okay, so this is a stacked category here. What do we make of these nominees?
Jonathan Groff, I'd say, is an interesting nominee because he won the Tony last year for Merrily. Also someone who's incredibly beloved in the theater community. And everyone, I mean, the ticket sales for Just in Time, which he's starring in, are amazing. And I'd say that's based on the strength of love for Jonathan Groff and also his performance. I think the question is just whether they'll give it to him 2 years in a row for a Tony.
Darren Criss, who's been on Broadway before, but never in a role like this as a kind of futuristic AI guy. Like, the physicality of this role is unbelievable. The comedy, the vocals, all of it. And yet Jonathan Groff is amazing as Bobby Darin in Just in Time, and watching the enthusiasm of audiences responding to that show suggests that it could be him. But I also think that a lot of people may be underestimating or discounting unfairly Tom Francis, like Sunset Boulevard. I was going to say that, right? He's terrific, and
he is the viral outdoor sidewalk moment. That I think that's one of the top thing people were talking about this year in the theater community.
Totally,
I really, there's such virtuoso planning involved in that whole post-intermission sequence where he starts way up on an upper floor in the dressing room. He sticks his head in the dressing rooms all the way down. He's like, chorus boys are making out on the stairs. He's doing all this stuff. And then he's out the theater, outside through the exit doors onto the street, doing this number without ever kind of missing a note. And
in the rain and the snow.
Yeah, it's an incredible bit of theatricality there. It's a real coup de théâtre. But I think the performance is there all the way through. I don't think it's just that stuff. Yeah. I think it's a very consistent, solid performance. But, I agree that it seems to be between Darren Criss and Jonathan Groff. And I would say Jonathan Groff is absolutely beloved in the community. And one thing that maybe will play on a lot of people's minds, even subconsciously, is that he was very close to Gavin Creel. That loss of Gavin Creel at a young age was just devastating to Broadway this year. I'm sure there's going to be a tribute on the Tonys as part of the telecast, but he was really just a trooper, able to step into any kind of show. He was in Hair and She Loves Me and all kinds of musicals. He was just always consistently great and an absolute beloved person in the community, completely adored. So maybe people say, let's give it to Jonathan Groff, so he kind of gives a big shout out to Gavin.
I was going to say, it also, I had to look this up. Darren has been on Broadway a lot, but this is his first Tony nomination, so that could also play in. He's also someone who's jumped in as replacements, like in Hedwig and the Angry Itch and How to Succeed in Business. So he's seen as someone who is just very all Broadway, all the way, willing to do whatever for a role. So that could go in his favor as well when people are like, oh, we have not given Darren Criss a Tony yet.
Totally.
So who do you two think should win?
I think I'd give it to Tom Francis.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. I don't think it's going to happen, but I would be very happy if it did.
Me too, but I guess you're going to ask who actually will. And this is a really tough one because I could totally see it going to Groff, but I think Criss. Again, the show has been much more embraced by the voters. He did not just win last year, unlike Groff, and I mean, people really like him and that performance in that show.
Okay, guys, we'll be back in just a bit to talk about some of the other big awards of the night: Best Musical, Best Play, and Best Revivals of a Play and Musical. Stay tuned.
My friend Ted Chapin asked me to do this night at the 92nd Street Y of Bobby Darin music. I went home that night, I looked at Bobby Darin on YouTube, and I was like, what? This guy was not just singing music. He was living it with his full body and soul. So the idea of telling his story in a live theater setting felt like the place to do it.
Talk about defying gravity. I am currently 30 feet in the air on the beam, another attraction here at Top of the Rock, which pays homage to one of New York's most iconic images. Now, this year's Tony's host knows a thing or two about flying high. She's a Tony, Emmy, Grammy winner, with just one award away from EGOT status, and all with a voice that truly soars. So let's take a closer look at the powerhouse leading this year's Tony Awards, Cynthia Erivo.
Before she was defying gravity on the big screen. Cynthia Erivo was hitting all the right notes on the Broadway stage. Back in 2016, Erivo won a Tony Award for Best Leading Actress in a Musical for her portrayal of Celie in the revival of The Color Purple. Now, nearly 10 years later, Erivo is set to host the 78th Annual Tony Awards. While appearing on CBS Mornings, she called it a really beautiful full-circle moment.
Broadway kind of changed my life. I think it's because of Broadway and because of the work that we did in The Color Purple that I get to sit here with you now.
Erivo also shared that she's excited to celebrate the work that has occurred on Broadway over the past year, as well as see the performances this year's Tony nominees bring to the stage during the show.
I've seen everything this season, and it has been one of the most amazing things to be able to sit in the audiences and just soak in all of the amazing work that everyone is doing. So I'm very excited to see all the performances.
You can see those show-stopping performances, Erivo steering the ship, and much more when the Tonys air live on CBS on Sunday, June 8th at 8 p.m. Eastern.
You know, trying to get an original musical made about robots in like the near future in Korea, this is a very hard elevator pitch, but it's not too dissimilar, and I joke about this a lot, from like me trying to pitch you Batman or like Back to the Future in a world where they weren't as culturally ubiquitous as they were, right?
Yeah.
If you didn't know what I was talking about, so let me get this straight. It's this rich white guy, he fights clowns. Why do people like it? And you go, well, it's because it's done really well, and the character's really cool, and it's a cool aesthetic, and people are gonna love it. It's gonna be a multi-million-dollar like franchise. It's gonna be huge. I'm like, all right, dude.
You can't wrap your head around it.
Yeah,
at
it's like,
first,
sure,
yeah.
all right, you're insane. But again, like those things, with superb direction and vision and all the pieces coming together at the right time, and alchemy that is you can't build in a lab. Things can take off because there's nothing else like it.
We're here at the Belasco Theater, home of the 10-time Tony-nominated Maybe Happy Ending, a show that blends science fiction with a story about love, memory, and what it means to connect. The show follows two helper bots, Claire and Oliver, and today we're going behind the scenes to see how this futuristic world is put together.
A robot does what she always does. It's the only way it'll be okay.
I'm Justin Scribner. I'm the production stage manager for Maybe Happy Ending and a longtime collaborator of Michael Arden and Dane Laffrey's. I met Michael in 2006. We did a show called The Times They Are A-Changin' with Twyla Tharp on Broadway. He was in it, and I was the assistant stage manager, so we forged a friendship backstage, mostly laughing, mostly having a great time together. On a big Broadway show, often the production stage manager is the one that everyone calls during the day if anything comes up. So actually, my day starts when I check my phone in the morning, and there could be any number of things that happen. Usually you have understudies and swings that are ready to go on at a moment's notice, and when actors get sick, injured, take days off, it is the stage managers who are planning for that show during the day. So whenever I show up to the theater, it's really to make sure that everyone's got all the things that they need, that we're heading towards a smooth show in the evening. We're kind of like the central nervous system, the communicators, the facilitators. Yeah, I call us the parents backstage. This show is so tech heavy and so filled with special effects and relies on all of the design elements working in tandem, and this beautiful script But I am really thrilled that we were able to achieve Dane and George's vision for the scenic and video design. And it was a hard job, but it was kind of like putting together a really complicated puzzle.
Into the stage door.
Right here, this is our call board here. Entrance to the stage, Darren's dressing room. We have a whole tower of dressing rooms here. I have a fabulous team of stage managers I work with. We live in here, and then right here is the calling room.
Okay, walk me through what exactly a calling room is, because I don't think I've ever heard of that before.
It's not a phrase. It doesn't exist usually. Usually you have a calling desk, a stage manager's desk, or a calling booth. But here, because we have so few actors, we had empty dressing rooms, and I advocated for us to have a desk space. So I sit here and I have my calling script. Please. When the show gets going, I have a huge color shot of the stage, and I utilize cue lights and my headset to call all of the automation, lights, sound, video cues in the show. And I do it rhythmically, and I'm always counting music. But basically I'm following along, and there are some sequences where I'm really talking very quickly, and I have indicated every time our set moves, I have what is happening on the left and how I'm cueing it on the right. I've got 19 crew members on headset with me as we're going about the show, and it's an hour and 45 minutes of nonstop action. And when I'm cueing them, often we've organized it so that I will warn our auto fly operator, who's up on the 4th floor with a big computer setup, our auto deck operator, who's in the basement, also with a huge computer setup. And when their lights go on, they are warned, they know that the sequence is coming up. And I probably will be also calling a light cue at the same time. And I'll start the transition by saying go along with the lights, and so that everything can move in tandem together. Sometimes the computers will say, danger, we can't go, that we can't roll this unit because something else is in its way. And so for that reason, I'm actually grateful that we have a system that speaks to itself and is able to tell us if there's going to be an issue, but we always try to avoid not, stopping the show
But
at
if
all
you
costs.
need to, you're right there.
That's right.
Yeah, you got it.
And I have so much trust in our team, so it's really great.
This is awesome.
And I know this might even be fun. When the packing is done, I'm finally hitting the road.
Dane and George, it turns out, use some of the same software when they are building their material. And what they were able to do was do some pre-visualization of how this was going to look and get really clever about what areas of the stage are actually secretly made up of video. Here we are in the hallway.
Wow.
And one little tidbit is we're on the 106th floor, and they're in units 82 and 84. But we chose that because Michael's birthday is October 6th, 1982.
Wow.
So a little Easter egg in there.
Little Easter egg.
Would you like to come in?
Yes, of course. Let's come on in, guys. I heard that these apartments were actually based off of a real modular building in Tokyo. So
Yes.
are you able to talk about that a little?
I think it was built in the 70s, and it was an idea of a modular building that you could actually take the units out with a crane and move them to other buildings. So if you wanted to move, you just have your entire little home. So these cubes kind of inspired them to build a world that Oliver essentially never leaves. And you can say this is the paper wall that has the video behind it, and you would never know. These are all made for the actors. Each of the actors has their own set of these. So the understudies also did a photo shoot. It's so beautiful. This is the charger that lights up that he then charges himself with. And there's a lot of lighting built into it. So we have moving lights above, there are speakers. This is a fake speaker just for show. And then the audience doesn't see these, but this is all helping to light the unit as it moves in and out.
And then this is the star of the show.
Star of the show. And of course, Waboon has his own emotional arc. He starts a little sad, so you can see he's getting into character is what's happening. his favorite singers. Obviously, we have Nat King Cole and Ella Fitzgerald. With Bill Evans, and then all of the magazines that he gets through the mail chute, which come zooming in from above.
Okay, so now are we stepping into...
This is Claire's unit.
Wow.
Come on in.
Let's take a look.
Absolutely. It's interesting, their personalities are revealed through the design here. She's kind of strung up some fairy lights in a somewhat haphazard half manner, and she's turned her desk into a workshop. So what she cares about is getting her battery fixed. But they went so far as to even create a ground plan of what the units might look like in the building, this 106-floor building. The writers really were inspired by this idea, the hermetic lifestyle of the hikikomori Japanese men who were sealed off in their own little rooms in their cubes. And here, Oliver has kind of never left his apartment for 12 years. And we kind of assume part of that is because James wasn't someone who actually left his apartment very often, and he had a robot to keep him company in his little world. The truth is, the genius of this design is that you don't know it's coming. It's not like when you sit down and you're watching the show, you say, oh, I can see the video is going to be a big part of the show. It just feels very intimate and small. And as the show kind of unravels and you peel back the layers, design elements are revealed and you kind of enter the world of these robots' adventure. It's really cool.
And if it doesn't come for free, well, that's the way that it has to be.
You know, our show deals with themes that were topical in 2007, and I would say more topical when we ran in the fall, but even more topical today and more relevant today, because these ideas of what it means to be American and who gets to call themselves Americans is something that's being questioned almost daily. And I think for our show addresses that question and that theme in a way that not only talks about it, but shows people why it's so harmful to the fabric of our society.
And this is not only your first Tony nomination, but you are also making history with this nomination. So how special is that for you?
It's so special. I didn't know until David told me a couple of weeks before the actual nomination. You know, the Tonys have been around for 78 years, so the fact that I'm the very first Asian American is meaningful. It makes me very happy, and it also makes me a little sad, too. And the more important breakthrough is when there's an Asian American who wins. So the nomination is one thing, getting the award is the other.
Did you know the Tony Awards were named after Antoinette Perry, an actress, director, and co-founder of the American Theater Wing? They were called the Perry Awards in its early years, but eventually the award handed out was called a Tony, and the name stuck. The Tonys have had many memorable moments in its rich history. Take a look.
How did this legendary ceremony honoring Broadway's biggest and brightest stars come to be? Let's take a look back at the history of the Tony Awards. This photo was taken at one of the first ceremonies in 1950, just a few years after the American Theater Wing established the Tony Awards to celebrate excellence in theater in 1947. Performers at the first ceremony included Mickey Rooney and Ethel Waters. The awards were named after Antoinette Tony Perry, an actress, director, and producer, as well as the dynamic wartime leader of the American Theater Wing, who had recently passed. The Broadway community quickly embraced the Tony Awards, and the gala dinner became one of the highlights of the New York theater season. But the ceremony wasn't broadcast on national television until the 21st Annual Awards in 1967, which was also the first time the event was co-presented with the Broadway League. Guests that year included Carol Burnett, Warren Beatty, Barbara Harris, who won a Tony that night, Harry Belafonte, and Kirk Douglas, among many others. In 1978, CBS began carrying the ceremony, and the network has broadcast the Tonys every year since. Today, the Tony Awards remain the pinnacle of acknowledgement for Broadway theater, and winning one has become a crucial component in obtaining the highly coveted EGOT, aka when a performer has won an Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, and a Tony. The list of only 21 performers in history who can call themselves competitive EGOT winners includes Viola Davis, Rita Moreno, Jennifer Hudson, Andrew Lloyd Webber, Elton John, and Audrey Hepburn.
I don't think it gets much campier than our Hit Me sequence, where in Act 2 we're
trying to kill each other and trying to do as much harm to each other as we possibly can. And spoiler alert, my head gets knocked off, and then my head comes back in on a tray while my body is still sitting there on the couch. And there's also 2 grown men dressed up as us fighting. It's very clearly not us. You know, it's and I really credit all that to our amazing director, Christopher Gattelli. He just had all of these incredible ideas and such a delightfully smart vision in executing all of because it could very easily go too far, you know, but it just doesn't, because we've been under his guidance.
Okay, we're back with our Tony panelists, and now it's on to the big awards: Best Musical, Best Play, Best Revival of a Musical, and Best Revival of a Play. Let's dive in with our Best Musical nominees. The nominees for Best Musical are Buena Vista Social Club, Dead Outlaw, Death Becomes Her, Maybe Happy Ending, Operation Mincemeat, a new musical.
I personally would probably go with Death Becomes Her, just because, you know, it is an incredible reinvention of a show that is, you know, the Robert Zemeckis film is very special effects laden. It's very reliant on all of that, on the transformations and things you can't really do in the same way on stage. And just the fact that they found a way to do that convincingly. And, you know, I mean, I think it's a pretty fun show. And there's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah. And Caitlin, what were some of the hottest tickets in terms of musicals this season? What played well commercially? What didn't?
Yeah, it was an interesting year for musicals, I guess, on Broadway, because the hottest tickets in the industry were actually the plays, especially Good Night and Good Luck, which we mentioned made more than 4 million, or is making more than 4 million weekly. Othello, which is still selling well. Glengarry Glen Ross, which is still selling well. I'd say in this musicals category, they're all doing decently well, but you're not seeing the sky high prices that you're seeing with plays or things like that. And maybe part of that is just that these are not celebrity driven properties. These are just kind of solid best musicals on Broadway.
This is the one category where the Tony win can really move the needle.
Yeah.
And that's why I think whichever show wins here really could see a nice bump.
Yeah.
This is what tourists coming to New York, they want to see the Tony winning musical.
Now, all of these original musicals, can we talk a little bit about how different each production is from each other?
I'd say Maybe Happy Ending is like a small, it feels small, but they extended it for Broadway, like a small little intimate musical, a love story between 2 robots.
It's intimate, but unlike a lot of other shows that moved from off-Broadway, which this one didn't, it came straight to Broadway. But there is this feeling sometimes that this belongs in an off-Broadway house. It does not belong in this massive barn of a theater. I would say that to a degree about Dead Outlaw. Even though I enjoyed it, I like it. You know, Maybe Happy Ending works in a theater on Broadway. There's something that you connect with about those characters. And, you know, I think that probably sets it apart. It's very, as Caitlin said, it's very sort of restrained. It's not full of big effects or whatever. Whereas Death Becomes Her is very reliant on splashy showstoppers and effects and all of that, and lighting magic.
Yeah. So who do we think should win?
You know, maybe I'm going to go with Maybe Happy Ending. It's a really charming show. And also, you got to take into account that as much as the road promoters, the theater owners on the road are looking at potential touring properties, they're all thinking Death Becomes Her is going to be cripplingly expensive. Maybe Happy Ending, we can move in and out for a few weeks, advertise well, and it's not a high cost production.
Yeah, it's like just 4 people.
Yeah.
I'd also say Maybe Happy Ending, because I think people will want to reward the original, small, intimate musical.
Yeah. And who will win?
I do think it's Maybe Happy Ending. Again, it's one of 3 here that have 10 nominations. There's obviously a lot of affection from all of these, but based on the way voters have broken in the last few years, that is right up their alley.
Yeah. But still, I wouldn't count out Death Becomes Her or Buena Vista.
Okay, let's move on to our Best Play nominees. Best Play nominees are English, The Hills of California, John Proctor is the Villain, Oh Mary, and Purpose.
they're all pretty interesting and close in terms of who could win.
And Jez Butterworth's had a nice run in this with plays at the Tonys last few years. So Hills of California was great, but it's not as top of mind because I think it's been gone now for a while.
It's also maybe not up there with Jerusalem, which he won a bunch of Tonys for.
Or Ferryman.
Yeah, or The Ferryman, yeah. I mean, he's done some great work, and it's a great play. And Sam Mendes does a beautiful job directing it, but in a very strong ensemble. But yeah, things tend to fade fast when they've closed already.
And the interesting thing here also is that Hills of California and Purpose are, of these 5 nominees, the most overall nominated with 7. Purpose also just won the Pulitzer Prize for Drama over Oh Mary. And yet I think there's a pretty clear sense that Oh Mary is out front here. Again, even with fewer noms, 5 noms, it's just unlike anything else that I think anybody can. Yes, it's ahistorical, it's silly, but it's also smart. And this is evoking an unusual level of enthusiasm and passion, even among David's battle-hardened contemporaries in the reviewing community.
I think that, you know, there's a sense of release when you see that show. You just, oh my God, what a relief it is to laugh, you know, to just be transported like this. And any show with Abraham Lincoln works for me. But
You mean Mary's husband?
yes,
Mary's husband.
yeah. But yeah, I mean, that whole cast is fantastic. There's so many great lines in that, and you just come out of it kind of reeling, trying to remember them all.
The South of what?
The South of what? It's so great. I like Purpose quite a lot. I really enjoyed it, but it didn't stay with me. And I also think I think Brandon Jacobs Jenkins is a tremendous playwright, so talented. I don't think this is his best play.
I'd say John Proctor as the villain also maybe is an interesting dark horse in this category. As David was saying, there's a lot of enthusiasm behind that play. It's bringing in young audiences. And it came to Broadway in a non-traditional model. It was at colleges and regional theaters. So it's known across the country, but it hasn't had a big off-Broadway or regional run. And maybe it gets rewarded for its winning back to Broadway.
I'd be
major upset. Yeah, but cool.
That dark horse win. Also, you know, John Proctor's the villain. It has a sort of heaviness about its themes. It's Me Too, sexual abuse, even just an English class at high school going and re-examining Arthur Miller's The Crucible. They all sound like big, stodgy, kind of heavy ideas and themes, but the show has a lightness to it.
Yeah. So, David, Caitlin, who should win?
Oh, Mary, all the way. Just hilarious, ingenious, and deceptively smart. I think it's great stuff.
Caitlin, what would you say is your pick?
I might go with John Proctor, just because I'd be interested to see what a best play Tony does for that play and kind of what kind of life it has after that.
Scott, who will win?
I think it's got to be Oh Mary, and this might be the biggest margin of any category. There just seems to be such excitement for it that I think it's going to do it.
When you look at the New York Post or whatever on any given week, like every celebrity in the world is being to see it,
including Sally Field, who played Mary.
Oh,
Like
I love that they made us a group outing.
Yeah.
Tony Kushner, Steven Spielberg, and Sally Field.
Exactly.
Brilliant.
That was great.
And finally, Best Revival of a Musical and Best Revival of a Play. Nominees for Best Revival of a Musical: Floyd Collins, Gypsy, Pirates the Penzance Musical, Sunset Boulevard. And Best Revival of a Play nominees are Eureka Day, Our Town, Romeo and Juliet, and Yellowface. Okay, so out of all of these revivals, which one brought a fresh perspective to you on an original production?
Probably Sunset. I mean, it's hard to compare the two categories, but Sunset is a fresh take on this, 1980s musical that was kind of grand and had so many set pieces and was kind of stodgy. Lumbering, as you said. And this is a Jamie Lloyd stripped down production using live video. So that feels pretty exciting.
Yeah.
I personally would go with Gypsy just because I love the production, but I can completely see the merit in giving that award to Sunset Boulevard.
And there's history, not that it's necessarily top of mind for voters, but Gypsy, a revival, previously won in 1990, although the original famously did not win way back 59 or something.
Right.
Sunset Boulevard, the original, won Best Musical in 1995. Like these are both so different from any prior incarnation.
Yeah.
It does seem like it would be between those two, and we can say that Sunset Boulevard, though, by far is the most nominated in this category with 7. So I think that probably that's the favorite.
Romeo and Juliet is launching an interesting Tony's campaign where they are just defining what revival means, which is, like refreshing or a new take on something. So they're trying to make the point that like, we're doing Romeo and Juliet, but this was totally different. It was a very Gen Z take, maybe the most Gen Z thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, I think that the only place where there were more high schoolers in the audience than John Proctor is the villain was it Romeo and Juliet. And it's not just a Baz Luhrmann kind of reinvention, it's its own thing. I think it was looked on with a little bit of snobbery by a lot of the theater critics, but I just thought it had great energy. Kit Connor is the real deal on stage. There's something to be said for that, for shows that are building new generations of theater goers.
And I just will say for Yellowface that I think was very well done. 3 nominations was not a lot, but it's the most for any of these 4, and had some timely things to say.
So David, Caitlin, I'm going to ask you guys one more time. Who do you think should win in each of these categories?
Revival of musical, I'd say Sunset for me. A revival of a play, I would say Eureka Day.
I would go quite happily with either Gypsy or Sunset here, because as much as I prefer Audra's performance, I do think that the production, the ingenuity behind Sunset is a total reinvention, a reimagination of a play. Just for the chutzpah of it, I would go for Romeo and Juliet. But I think I'll be one of like 3 voters.
And Scott, who is taking home this Tony?
For Revival of a Musical, I think it's Sunset Boulevard, and for Revival of a Play, I think it's Yellowface, not just because they're both the most nominated in their categories, but that's certainly one of the considerations. With Sunset Boulevard, it's just, I think it helps to be very different than anything else that's on the ballot, and that is certainly the way that they did that was so creative. And with Yellowface, I don't know, I guess we've seen a million versions of Our Town and Romeo and Juliet, and this it just felt a little more new and exciting.
So Yellowface and
Sunset Boulevard. We'll see. Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll tune in on Tony night to see who walks away our big winners. Thank you so much again to our panelists, David Rooney, Caitlin Houston, and Scott Feinberg.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, guys, thanks so much for tuning in to the Hollywood Reporters Awards Countdown, Tony's edition. I know I've had such a blast breaking down Broadway's biggest night with you all. And I'm telling you, seeing these New York City skylines never gets old. Well, we'll see who wins big at the 78th Tony Awards when it airs live this Sunday on CBS at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Thanks so much for tuning in. And until next time, I'm Neha Joy, and this is the Hollywood Reporters Awards Countdown.